The vastness of the ocean had always been a mystery to humanity, but for the crew of the Nereus submarine, it was a challenge that promised great discoveries. The mission was simple: explore a newly discovered trench at the bottom of the Pacific Ocean, at a depth never before reached. Equipped with cutting-edge technology and driven by the promise of scientific glory, the five-member crew believed they were prepared for anything. Or so they thought. As the Nereus descended, the liquid darkness swallowed the sunlight, leaving only the artificial glow of the headlights to illuminate the abyss. Pilot Samira kept the course steady, while geologist Clara analyzed the data in real time. Beside her, marine biologist Evan examined images of bioluminescent creatures, marveling at the diversity of life in the depths. The silence was broken only by the sound of the communication system and the occasional creak of the submarine's hull, strained by the immense water pressure above. The tension heightened when Clara, staring at her monitors, furrowed her brow. "I'm picking up a geometric structure. This isn't natural." Samira adjusted the headlights, and a surreal sight emerged before them. A vast city with intricate towers and domes stretched across the bottom of the trench. The structures appeared to have been carved from black stone, covered in fluorescent moss. It was a sight both beautiful and unsettling. This is impossible." Clara's voice trembled. "It looks thousands of years old," murmured Evan. "But how could something like this be here, with no record of it?" Mission Commander Julian ordered the Nereus to approach cautiously. The city appeared abandoned, but there was something strange about the way the submarine's lights reflected off the walls. They seemed to move, not like shadows, but as if the stone itself was breathing. As the submarine approached one of the largest structures, resembling a cathedral, the sensors began to malfunction. Screens flickered, and the radar emitted erratic signals. Samira tried to stabilize the systems, but the interference was intense. Then a deep sound, like a distant groan, echoed through the speakers. "What was that?" Evan asked, his face pale. "Nothing natural," Julian replied, his voice firm, but his eyes betraying concern. Suddenly, an external camera captured movement. A shadow passed by too quickly to identify, but large enough to send chills down their spines. "Something's out there," Clara whispered, her heart racing. Julian ordered the Nereus to hold position while they deployed exploration drones. The small robotic vehicles slid out of the submarine, their lights cutting through the darkness. As they entered the city, the drones revealed even more unsettling details. The walls were covered in carvings and symbols no one on the team recognized. "These markings? They look like stories," Evan said, leaning in to study the images. "But there's something wrong with them. It's like they're describing something coming from within." One of the drones detected movement again, but this time it wasn't too fast. Everyone saw it. A humanoid silhouette, tall and distorted, with eyes glowing like headlights, stared at the drone before vanishing into the darkness. "Whatever that is, it's still alive," Julian whispered. The silence inside the Nereus was suffocating. The crew, who had been filled with excitement over the discovery, now felt the weight of uncertainty and fear. Commander Julian kept his eyes fixed on the monitors as the drones transmitted disturbing images of the submerged city. That humanoid figure with glowing eyes had disappeared, but its presence still lingered like a shadow over everyone. "We should retreat," Clara suggested, her voice low, almost pleading. "This isn't something we should be exploring without more preparation." "We're here to uncover the unknown," Julian replied, his gaze unwavering. "But we need to be cautious. Samira, keep the systems ready for a quick evacuation." The drones continued their exploration, revealing more unsettling details. The carvings on the walls became increasingly numerous as they ventured deeper into the city. Some symbols appeared to depict humans worshipping grotesque, deformed figures. Others showed what seemed to be a cataclysmic event, massive waves, cracks in the earth, and the complete destruction of the city. Then, one of the drones captured something even more alarming. A large door, adorned with intricate carvings of screaming faces, stood slightly ajar. Beyond it, only darkness, though the sensors detected movement. "This isn't right," Evan said, examining the readings. "There's something moving inside that structure, but we can't identify it." Before any decisions could be made, the submarine's systems began to flicker again. Alarms echoed throughout the Nereus, and the radar indicated a massive object moving toward the vessel. "Amira, what's happening?" Julian asked, his voice tense but steady. "I don't know. Something's interfering with the navigation systems. It's like an electromagnetic wave coming from the city." Suddenly, the submarine shuddered from an impact. The crew was thrown against the walls as red lights flashed throughout the cabin. The sound of scraping metal echoed, and the hull trembled as though something was trying to tear it open. "What was that?" Clara shouted, gripping her chair. The drones, now out of control, began transmitting static-filled images. But amid the interference, a figure emerged on the screens. It was the same humanoid silhouette, but this time more detailed. Its skin seemed to be made of something resembling coral, and its glowing eyes pulsed with a menacing intensity. It was no longer fleeing. It was staring directly into the cameras, as if aware it was being watched. "Whatever this is, it's coming for us," Evan said, his breathing quickening. Julian grabbed the internal radio. "Samira, get us out of here now." Samira tried to activate the thrusters, but the systems were sluggish, almost as though something external was preventing them from functioning fully. The scraping sound grew louder, and for a moment, the submarine's hull seemed to buckle under the pressure. Then the deep sound returned, the same low groan they had heard before. But this time, it seemed to come from within the city rather than outside. It was as though the city itself was alive, reacting to their presence. A second impact nearly capsized the submarine, but suddenly the lights stabilized. The radar showed the massive object had stopped moving. "Is it letting us go?" Clara asked, her voice trembling. Julian didn't seem convinced. "No, this is a warning. Something is watching us, testing how far we'll go." As the Nereus slowly ascended to a safer position, the monitors displayed one final image, captured by one of the drones before it lost signal entirely. A vast underground hall filled with humanoid figures frozen in time, their faces turned upward, etched with expressions of eternal terror. The Nereus slowly ascended to a safer zone, but the tension inside the submarine was suffocating. Each member of the crew was grappling with the fear that had gripped them. Julian knew they couldn't turn back now, not after witnessing such an extraordinary and terrifying discovery. They needed answers about what was happening in that city and what those creatures were. "We can't just leave," Julian finally said, breaking the silence. "This could be the greatest discovery in human history." "Or the last thing we ever do," Clara countered, her voice laced with fear. "The city is warning us. Those things, whatever they are, clearly don't want us here." Evan, staring at the recordings of the underground hall filled with humanoid figures, seemed captivated. "Did you see their faces?" "That wasn't reverence. That was terror. They were fleeing from something, or someone." As the debate continued, Samira noticed something on the tracking system. "Commander, something's wrong. One of the drones is still active. It's sending out a weak signal." Julian immediately ordered the signal to be traced. If the drone was still operational, it could contain vital information about the city and its origins. However, what they found was more disturbing than expected. The signal was coming from inside the large cathedral, the same structure where movement had been detected earlier. "It's drawing us in," Evan murmured, almost to himself. "It's just an automated signal. Julian replied, trying to maintain composure. Samira, can you retrieve the data remotely? Negative. The interference is too strong. If we want that drone's data, we'll have to go inside the cathedral, Samira said, hesitant. Go inside, Clara almost shouted. You saw what happened when we got close before. That thing is still in there. Julian looked at his crew, their faces a mix of fear and determination. He knew that asking them to return to that place was risky, but the mission demanded it. The city seemed almost deliberate, as if it were being guided by an ancient intelligence. We have to try, Julian said firmly. Prepare the Nereus. Samira, keep the engines ready for a quick escape. Against Clara's protests and Evan's evident nervousness, the Nereus slowly returned to the city. The journey back felt even more oppressive than before. The darkness seemed thicker, and the headlights of the submarine illuminated shapes in the distance that appeared to move, or maybe it was just the trick of the light. As they approached the cathedral, the submarine's sensors began to fail once more. The deep, resonant sound returned, accompanied by a faint, almost imperceptible hum, like murmuring voices. The Nereus stopped just meters from the cathedral's entrance, and Julian activated the submarine's robotic arm to release a smaller drone. The tiny vehicle entered the structure, its lights slicing through the darkness. The transmission remained stable for now, and the crew anxiously watched the feed. The interior of the cathedral was even stranger than its exterior. The drone's light revealed massive pillars adorned with carvings of hybrid beings, half human, half marine creatures. At the center of the hall, a large pool of dark water emitted a faint, irregular glow. That's where the drone fell, Samira said, pointing to the data on the screen. Before the small vehicle could retrieve any information, something moved in the pool. Slowly, a shape began to rise. Tall and slender, its limbs stretched beyond human proportions. Its eyes glowed with an intensity that pierced through the darkness, and its coral-like skin seemed to pulse with life. Then, for the first time, they heard something more than the deep groaning sound. A voice, low and guttural, echoed through the submarine's speakers. You do not belong here. The transmission cut out abruptly, and the drone's signal was lost. Inside the Nereus, panic erupted. Samira activated the engines immediately, but the submarine wouldn't move. Something invisible held it in place. A violent impact shook the vessel, and warning lights flashed as systems registered damage. Clara, pale and shaking, looked at Julian. It's holding us here, the city. It won't let us leave. Inside the Nereus, panic gripped the crew as the submarine remained trapped by an unseen force. Red warning lights flashed, and the metallic groans of the hull straining under pressure filled the cabin. Julian knew they were running out of time. Samira, can we move at all? Julian demanded. No, it's like something is holding us in place. Some kind of energy field. The thrusters are completely locked, Samira replied, frantically working the controls. Evan, give me a readout of what we're dealing with, Julian shouted. Evan stared at his monitor, his face pale. It's not physical. It's some kind of electromagnetic field, but it's beyond anything I've ever seen. It's like the city itself is generating it. The deep, resonant sound returned, louder and more oppressive than ever. This time it wasn't alone. Faint, guttural whispers accompanied it, growing louder and more distinct. Though the words were incomprehensible, they carried a palpable sense of menace. Clara clutched the arms of her chair, her voice trembling. We need to get out of here, now. Julian clenched his jaw, forcing himself to think clearly. He turned to Samira. Activate the emergency discharge system. If we can disrupt the field, we might be able to break free. Samira hesitated for only a moment before initiating the sequence. A high-voltage electrical discharge pulsed from the submarine's hull, lighting up the surrounding water. For a moment, the unseen force seemed to weaken, The Nereus groaned as its engines roared back to life, and the submarine began to inch forward. But the respite was brief. The whispers turned into a collective wail, and the city reacted. Bioluminescent patterns on the structures flared to life, pulsating in chaotic rhythms. From the pool inside the cathedral, the creature emerged fully, its massive form illuminated by the eerie glow. It was monstrous, an amalgamation of coral and flesh, its elongated limbs moving with unnatural fluidity, its glowing eyes locked onto the Nereus, and its mouth, filled with jagged teeth, opened as if to emit a sound. But instead, its voice filled the submarine's speakers, low and guttural, yet painfully clear. "You cannot leave, you belong to us." The creature lunged, slamming into the submarine with tremendous force. The impact threw the crew against the walls, and warning alarms blared as systems began to fail. The hull groaned under the pressure, and cracks began to appear in the reinforced glass of the cockpit. "Julian," Clara screamed, "we're not going to make it." Julian knew there was only one option left. "Samira, activate the escape module. We have to abandon ship." Samira's hands shook as she keyed in the command. The Nereus began its separation process, ejecting the small survival module from the main body. As the module detached, the creature turned its glowing eyes toward it. For a terrifying moment, it seemed to hesitate, as though deciding whether to pursue. Then, with a deafening groan, the main body of the Nereus exploded, the electrical systems overloading. The blast sent a shockwave through the water, temporarily disorienting the creature. The survival module's engines roared to life, propelling it upward toward the surface. Inside the module, the crew sat in stunned silence, watching the city grow smaller on the monitors. The bioluminescent glow faded into darkness, and the oppressive whispers finally ceased. When they breached the surface, the calm expanse of the ocean was a surreal contrast to the chaos they had left behind. The rescue beacon activated, and the crew waited in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. Evan finally broke the silence. "That city, it's not dead, it's waiting. And whatever that thing was, it won't stay down there forever." Julian looked out at the horizon, his face grim. He knew Evan was right. The discovery wasn't the end. It was only the beginning of something far more terrifying.